extraordinaire, the gemologist.
Hey Carl, Jason here. Listen to your road trip on the way to North Texas RPG Con. I hope you had a great time. I look forward to hearing how it went. Maybe you could do a Gorilla podcast on the way home. Hopefully the advice I gave you was useful. And you know, the thing about Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is everybody runs it a little bit differently. So, you know, you might come across people that say, no, like one big thing we talked about, like segments. And for spellcasters, some people start the spellcasting on like segment 0 or segment 1, regardless of when the group, you know, when the player character starts. So regardless of when that magic user starts casting, or when their action goes, you know, they start the count on 0 or 1, where most people, I don't know about most, but I always do it, you know, on the segment that character starts. So that's like something you'll see different people do different ways. So there are variants out there how people do it, but I do look forward to hearing how the game went and what people thought. So thank you for all that you do, and I'll talk to you soon.
It's an orgy game and everybody knows your name.
Vortex RPG Con.
The organizer and Satan are one and the same.
Vortex RPG Con.
And we'll all be bumping uglies playing in each other's games.
Vortex RPG Con.
North Texas RPG Con. First weekend in June at the Westin Inn in scenic Irving, Texas. Pack those dice bags and a spare liver.
Vortex RPG Con. Vortex RPG Con. Vortex RPG Con. Vortex RPG Con.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Geomologist Presents. That was Jason Connerly at the top of the show. Give me some good advice as a follow-up to the great advice he gave me before I went up to run my games, specifically the AD&D game that I ran from dungeon number 18, Chad Ranther's Bane, circa 1989. So they're at the tail end of AD&D 1E. I think the games went fantastic. You've heard my impressions and opinions, sort of more on an emotional level, and my general impression. I think here I want to get into a little bit more detail at how things went mechanically, and talk about that particular game, and then also talk about my Hyperborea game and the emergent style of play, and maybe give a proper recap to that. So for Chad Ranther's Bane, there definitely will be spoilers. And for Hyperborea, well, there really aren't any spoilers because it's an emergent drop in, drop out. That's my intention anyway. There may be some people from that group at that table that will join that game and play in a regular way. I invite anyone who's interested to hit me up and see if you'd like to do that. So there's a lot of fun to explore, and the premise is pretty loose, but anything that players find or discover becomes kind of general knowledge. So it's really not a spoiler. It's actually prep for the game. So I know there's a couple other people, and especially when I was sort of testing out the ideas, that will or may join as well. So I think it should be pretty fun and pretty cool. So I do also refer you to Daniel of Bandits Keep, his latest YouTube on how to use rumors to start a campaign or to start a game. I think that definitely inspired me to think about what happened in our game in Hyperborea specifically, and how that translated to the emergent style of play that happened. So I will give a brief pause here, and then I'll talk about Chad Ranther's Bane first. So I had 2 sessions of Chad Ranther's Bane. The first was on Saturday afternoon, and I had, how many players did I have? I had 6 players, I believe. 5 or 6 players. 1, 2, 3, 5 players. And they played the following. They played a Dwarven Fighter level 6, a Human Cleric level 6, a Halfling Thief level 5, a Human Illusionist level 5, and a Half-Elf Cleric Fighter 3/3. So I think it was a really good mix of player characters. I had brought pre-generated player characters that I actually found online. It was a really nice format, landscape format, with all the combat table, the damage for the weapon and attack, including the weapon adjustment based on the armor type. And then it had the spells for the cleric. It had alternative spell book for well, the cleric could choose whatever spells, but this is kind of the default selection was already there. But I think the cleric and the illusionist kind of reworked their spells for what they felt was more appropriate based on here the cleric, their ability to pray, and then the illusionist, what was in their spell book, coupled with what was on their default spell selection. So it's a really good character sheet. It worked really well, a good balance of player characters. And I thought they kind of listened, they bought in, and right away I thought it was pretty. And my goal was to get to a certain point in the game, and I felt that I achieved it. So the part one was called the house, part two was called the garden. So we got to more or less finish the house, and I thought it was very satisfying. So initially they just get to this way house. They put all their packs away. I just asked them what their general procedure was. What are they doing? Here's the layout. I did a little whiteboard of the map. I really appreciate it. In North Texas, they have like a big whiteboard, and it's you can use dry erase or wet erase to draw your little maps on it. So I drew the map. They placed themselves where they were with their little dice, or I think the cleric had a mini, which was great, and then shenanigans occurred. So the shenanigans were that they were shrunk. The premise was that they were looking for this Chad Ranther who had stolen the cash from an archmage hundreds of years ago, and they had found clues to which direction he went and what his whereabouts were, and he was just gone. So, so that's kind of why they were here in this wilderness with this way house. And then, like I said, they got shrunk. So they're a little disorientated. And then right away, the encounter that happens is these goblins know what's going to happen. They're hiding up in the rafters, and they rappel down. So they rappel. It's not that far in but what's it called? The relative distance, because of their size, the goblins are also shrunk, is like 400 feet. So I believe everyone but no one was surprised except for the thief, because they were scattered. There was like 3 people near the fire, so they could see each other across the distance on different benches. One person was at the table. I think they must have thought there was going to be like an ambush from outside or something. One was at the table watching, making, back to the wall type of thing. And then one was in the corner. The thief was in the corner, like really far away from the other player characters. And the dwarf had actually said, "Yeah, take off my armor. I don't have my armor on." I think the cleric had just laid it on the bench, but the dwarf had sort of taken their armor off and laid it to dry by the fire. So when they shrunk, and the same thing with the half elf's bow, was just laying on the side of the chair. So when they shrunk, their items shrunk also, and the bow was now 80 feet below him, relatively speaking. So I thought it was a good fight. They're less than 1 hit dice creatures, so after the initial shock of the attack, then like the dwarf fighter just kind of mopped him up. The illusionist, who was not surprised, cast a paralyzation, and 9 of them fell to their death. One just ran away, morale broke, and climbed up. And then at the table, the cleric fighter was on the chair, and the goblins attacked from the table and let off like a volley of arrows, but none of them hit. I wasn't rolling really great, but I think that's kind of the fun of it. It's like you're facing what you think are overwhelming odds, but if you hang in there, stay the course, good stuff. And the halfling, he was surprised, but the surprise round for the goblin was to finish climbing down, and he was able to tag one with the sling as it approached, and he killed it. Actually, he rolled well enough to kill it. But then during the course of the fight, he was surrounded by like 9 goblins at one point. Well, not all of them could get in, because he had his back to the edge and was pushing against him and killing and pushing up. So and he survived, and it was great. So the other player characters regrouped. No one was attacking the cleric, and then the cleric fighter said, "I'm not gonna stick around here and let them shoot at me with impunity." And he looked for a way down and was able to find and hook up his rope and shimmy down, climb down actually to the ground. And eventually they all met up with each other. They did run into like a rat, and they learned that only humanoids, that type, were affected. Animals were not. So there was these rats the size of horses that they had, and one of them, the cleric fighter, had to fight one off, and the cleric had gone to help him. But by the time they got there, the halfling was mopping things up, and the dwarf was able from range to snipe at some of the goblins that were on the fringes of the melee. So it went really well. So, initiative was fine. We didn't really have a lot of sort of the weird segment stuff in this particular case, which I thought was great. They were able to reconvene, put all their gear on, and then start exploring. They didn't want to go back up top, and the goblins did not pursue. So there were reinforcements that came after they killed about 10, 20, 30, 29 goblins, I think, were killed out of an initial force of 40. They were reinforced, but by that time the illusionist had already left the chair that they were on and gone to the floor. And the goblins decided not to pursue, probably, I guess after I rolled morale, they decided not to pursue, probably because of the giant rats that were lingering about on the floor. So then it was pretty cool. They continued to explore. They went into the stables. They also could hear the booming neighs and consternation of their horses, who knew something was up but couldn't figure it out. They were huge, like kaiju sized. So they really didn't want to try to go there and try to deal with those, because they didn't want to get stomped on. They did see like someone with their backs to them, and it was great. I really appreciate a game where the niche players can do their niche stuff. So the halfling was able to sneak. They weren't, they're 6th level characters, so they're pretty competent. The halfling was able to sneak and backstab and successfully take him out. Then they climbed up this rope ladder to a shelf. They snuck onto the shelf and saw that there was a group getting a ballista ready, and they attacked him with magic and stealth and took them out, captured one, and found out about the crazy leader of this band of people who had been shrunk and stuck together. And he was the Chad Ranther, calling himself the Cat and styling himself as a god. So the characters rested. I thought that was key strategically. After they rested up there on the shelf, they really didn't do anything with the ballista. They pulled up the rope ladder, and between the big strong characters were able to carry it around. And I thought it was brilliant that the player who played the thief thought about the geography of the situation. You know how there's like a shelf around a stable, right? I can't remember what it's called, the railing, to hold everything, and they were able to basically skirt around the railing. I mean, it being, at most 4 to 5 inches, but they were like an inch, so it's like 20 feet wide for them or so. So I think that worked really well. And then they used a rope ladder to climb down and assaulted Chad Ranther's domain. Again, they had taken a prisoner, and then they actually, with a combination of spells and diplomacy, learned everything about what was going on and said, "Hey, we're going to free you from this curse." And they made their reaction roll, and it was positive, extremely positive, actually. Apparently, the dwarf talked him into joining them and giving him a layout of the place. I drew kind of a map of that, and then again they went in with silent spells and color spray and paralyzation, and took out like a guard room, convinced who they didn't tie up to join them and tell them where things were at and what the layout was. And they were able to sneak. They went to where the rat cavalry pens were and put a hold person, paralyzed the rat keeper. So the rats really didn't attack or do anything. They were able to keep him calm. And then they climbed up a shaft. The halfling did have trouble climbing up this shaft, unfortunately. It had spikes pointing down, injured himself a couple times, and then that got the notice of the guards up there, which turned out to be gnolls. Interestingly, the half-elf cleric fighter knew Gnoll and was able to try to talk to them. It didn't really work, so the alarm was kind of raised. But then the Gnoll, foolishly, I rolled a saving throw, peered down there with his bow ready to shoot anything down there, but there was no one. Well, the halfling was invisible, so he didn't see anything. And then, because the illusionist had cast a spell on the halfling, and then the color sprayed him, and he fell to his death. And then the halfling was finally able to get up with the help of the other players. And while the other Gnoll guard up there was trying to get reinforcements and call out to Chad Ranther, the halfling again struck in the back and killed him with one perfect stab. So the lair had been mustered, but they had allies that they had recruited, and the allies said, "Okay, we'll hold here if there's any reinforcements that really actually want to stay with Chad Ranther." But generally speaking, he seemed to be a manipulative, SOB. So then they eventually they kind of bluffed Chad Ranther a little bit, and based on the die rolls that happened, it worked, and he wasn't really ready for what happened next, which was kicking down the dwarf. Well, the halfling snuck up quietly, unlatched the door. The dwarf ran through and struck him, and then two hold persons. I made my first saving throw. Chad Ranther failed his first saving throw, but failed the second. He had a 50-50 chance, so the odds were correct. And then they tied him up, interrogated him, found out how to get out of this cursed situation, found out about the sphere of diminution, and that was the session. And I thought it went really well. They really enjoyed it. So yeah, I think that was AD&D 1E. Two players had never played AD&D 1E, and 3 were veterans, and I think they helped with any spot rulings, but there really weren't. It's not that hard a game, and I think it went really well. So yeah, let me pause here, and I'll talk about part 2. So part 2 picked up where part 1 left off. There were new players, and they picked. I think there was 2 repeat players that took the dwarf and the thief, and then one person decided to play the cleric, because that person, we just keep them going. So I kind of explained what had happened before, and then the other 3 players, they were just imprisoned by Chad Ranther and were freed. So we added a human fighter named Ogre, and it was great. The player did a Arnold Schwarzenegger voice the whole time. There was Frida, who was a ranger. I believe it was a human ranger. And then the new player who played a spellcaster played Dread Delgath, a human magic user, 5th level magic user. The ranger, I think, was also 4th, and then the fighter was 5th. And it was a good thing that the mage the person played the mage, because they were able to then dive into Chad Ranther's spellbook, because he was also a magic user. And magic user and illusionist back then in the AD&D you couldn't read the other's work. So he had a lot of good stuff. And then because of what the other players did, which was sort of use diplomacy to, in a way, free these people who had been manipulated, they were able to commandeer the rat cavalry, and they headed out from under the stables and into the garden. And I think that went really well. I kind of rolled a couple of random encounters, and they were the 2 toughest creatures, a giant snake and a giant weasel, relatively speaking. and they took him down pretty quick. They won initiative, and where I did calculate segments, but it didn't quite matter because they rolled a 6 and the bad guy rolled a 1 both times. So there's plenty of time for the magic user's spells to go off in that interim. Magic missile being very quick, and I think slow also, not 5 segments. So it worked really well for them. They took these creatures down, and then kept going. They found this landmark that they were told about, and saw some gnolls in the distance, but they didn't kind of go after them, knowing that Chad Ranther had made an alliance with the gnolls. They kind of hailed them, and the gnolls thought that these were Chad Ranther's people. They were trying to smoke out some other NPC, a human cleric, up on the statue, this gigantic, relatively speaking, statue. But they told the gnolls, hey, go get that weasel over there that we killed for you guys. And they're like, okay. So they took off. They found this guy. He knew exactly where to go to remove this curse. It was a sphere of diminution that was in the fountain, and they proceeded to go there. The other weird encounter was this ranger that they met on the road, who seemed pretty adamant about wanting to keep this tiny kingdom. And the players kind of left him in the dust after talking to him, not really wanting to engage with him too much, and then having the speed of mounted rats versus a person running after them in chainmail. Yeah, there's no way that person's going to catch them. So they continued on, and I think maybe that caused them to kind of skip going to like this tree where halflings had decided to create a little community that the priest that they rescued knew about. So they went right to the fountain, which was this lake, effectively was a pond full of fish, relatively giant fish. And then they figured out a way to go over there. They made rafts, actually, and they camped for the night. Unfortunately, they were attacked at night by giant ants. And the ranger used like he had found some, when they killed the snake and the weasel, he took some venom and some musk from the weasel. The musk kind of dissuaded most of the ants, but one ant was killed. Unfortunately, it did scare away all of the rats. The rats just took off. Didn't want to get bitten or engage with giant ants. About to say there's, too many. Don't want to deal with that. So they were spooked. They took off, and then the ogre though did manage to make sure that Nicodemus, he had named his rat, and I really loved that engagement. As an aside, so at this table, there were 4 players who had never played AD&D, although I guess the 2 from the day before makes that the second time they had played AD&D. 2 other players were really, helped with any spot rulings, but again, there really weren't any. It's such a quick and easy game, in my opinion, to run. Maybe the book is daunting, but yeah, I think that's what we talked about in the panel that Merc the Meek ran with myself, Daniel, and Jason, Daniel of Bandits Keep and Jason Connerly of Nerds RPG Variety Cast on Michael's Merc the Meek podcast, that you really studied and learned this, and I think it all came back, and it was almost like riding a bike, which I thought was kind of nice. So I was nervous the first day, but the second day, it was like running any other sort of fantasy game. So they crossed the pond. They were almost attacked by a giant fish, but threw some of the dead ants that they had kept into the water to distract him. Made it over, climbed up, and then found the sphere of diminution. It was a great. They tried various things to solve the puzzle. Eventually, it was brute force that prevailed. The players got together, and I used their bend bars, lift gates as a roll to combined to see if they could pull the sphere. It's like a 15-foot sphere, so pretty heavy. And they had Ogre, the player who played Ogre roll. He rolled an 06. They were able to push it over the side, and I let one of the players roll for the saving throw for falling for a glass, which is it's pretty steep. So the mage did shoot a lightning bolt at it, kind of make sure to deflect it away at an obtuse angle and not back at them. and cracked it. So it was already cracked, and they pushed it over, and it shattered. And then, as they were scrambling to get away from each other, realizing that they're probably going to now start growing, they all ended up splashing and in the pond and in a big pile, kind of laughing when they grew to the right size. And then Nicodemus, still a rat, jumped on the shoulder of Ogre, and a little tweaky, So now Ogre has a pet rat, which is pretty cool. So and then of course people were popping up. You can imagine, like in the stables, as they had confidence that the heroes would prevail. They all were ready and outside of their lair, so they could pop up in the stables. I'm sure the rats or the goblins, realizing what was happening, was running out of their little mouse hole and falling from the rafters and making a big giant pile of goblins in the house. Other denizens, maybe not fared so great, realizing they were growing, would have scrambled out. Some probably did not make it, but at least the strange ranger that they saw now pointed at the other ranger in the party and said, "No, why did you do this? Why?" And then left it at that, assuming that they would probably come to blows or exchange at least words. So that was my AD&D foray, Chad Ranther's Bane, and I really enjoyed it. I really want to jump back into some AD&D 1E. I don't know what I'd run. There's so many choices. And maybe just stick to, as best I can, rules as written with rulings along the way. All right. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the Hyperborea game. All right, so for Hyperborea, I had 7 players, and I did also have pre-gens. I had tried to make my own sort of set of pre-gens, but I just ran out of time, so I made 2 pre-gens, a Berserker and an Assassin, but I also printed out the pre-gens from Rogues Gallery 2. I think it was a Set 2E product, but things don't really change, or didn't really change that much. So at the table, the players played a common Berserk, a Greek Cataphract, a Saxon Barbarian, the Cryomancer. I believe the Cryomancer, where were they from? I don't quite remember. Maybe they were also just common, sort of a mixed. We had an Amazonian Paladin, then we had a Viking Runegraver, and an Atlantean Purloiner. So it was a good mix of classes at the table, which I really enjoyed. So I gave them the premise. The premise was that however you came here, you are now at Fort Thunder, which is on an archipelago, and it is run by Amazon Marines mainly, and they're using it as a waypoint for what they say is a trading post along the way between where the Amazons are from and Chromarium. Whether the players believe that or not, well, that remains to be seen. But however you got there, whether you were rescued by the Amazon from a slaver ship or from pirates, or just came here using your last bit of gold to find adventure, now you are here in Fort Thunder. The players introduced themselves. I told them about a job board that there was, and I think I gave all of them a rumor that I had. I rolled like a d20 and gave them an appropriate rumor. And I also, during the course of play, as they bought equipment or did things, if they had a positive reaction with an NPC, I gave them a new rumor or new information. If they just asked, I think when they asked and it was appropriate, I gave them another rumor to build the lore in this new location. So they went to the job board, actually. I had 6 jobs just around the island. The Fort Thunder, the Amazonian fort, is at the end of a lagoon. So you beach in the lagoon and then march on up into Fort Thunder. There is a bridge that goes over a sort of stream, and the Amazons are quartered on the far side of the bridge, while there's an adventurers quarter with hostels and a tavern and inn, a general store, other things that might occur or come up. There are a few temples. There's a temple to the twins, Artemis and Apollo. There is a temple to Zeus and Athena, and then there's a fort, like a keep on the other side of the bridge. The bridge is called the Bridge of New Beginnings because the Amazonians are very creative. So they went to the job board, checked it out. They found a job that suited their group. They kind of liked it. We had some really good interaction, I think, and I just rolled with it. And I love how they were meeting NPCs, kind of naming them. We did that randomly when it came to hirelings, like what ethnic group is the hireling from. We had when they got there, they got a porter, 2 porters, and a torchbearer. The porters were Celt, or sorry, I think a half Celt Pict and a Pictish Celt or something like that. We said that they were, of course, staring at each other angrily the whole time. But there's all sorts of people here. And interestingly, the torchbearer was an Oon. And if you don't know what Oon are, it's Oon. They are people who have escaped from being imprisoned and experimented on by the Migu. So the fungi from Yugoth. So he was very interesting. They don't have a name. They have a nine number designation. So he gave him his number designation. It's probably tattooed somewhere on the spot on his body, but they named him Jimmy instead. So it was really great, and I'm really happy that the players at the table brought Jimmy the Oon to life. I made him very creepy, and he just knew things and was another source of rumors and pointing out strangeness. So they march into the jungle, and this is kind of how the emergent play came about, right? So I rolled randomly encounters. I think every watch is going to take them sort of 2 watches, the morning watch and the afternoon watch, to get to the first sort of camp. During the morning watch, we rolled an encounter. So I just went around the table when I needed a random roll. I had the players roll, to embrace their fate. So they came across this procession of degenerate Thracians. They had heard about this group of degenerate Thracians that lived on the island, as well as beast men of different types, lizard men, hyena men, the Vormis. They had heard of an Ixian camp on the far side of the island. So they ran across this procession, and they saw that this procession was going to drown some of their fellow members, or some dressed in archaic bronze plate mail, a priest with a skull mask and had chainmail and a hammer, that they later learned were of Norse make. So there might be a Norse location, or a Norse, there was a longship that sailed into one of the rivers somewhere on the island. So they definitely stopped this. It was a good little fight. The other thing I thought was really cool, and again, I guess it's just my philosophy as a GM, the cataphract, they're like a cavalier, and they use horses. And the cataphract asked me, "Is there a horse that I can get?" And I think using diplomacy and negotiation and good role playing, I was going to give him a horse. Just how much it would cost and what he'd have to do to get it. I think because it would just kind of hamper or hinder Cataphract's ability. And he was able to commandeer a horse. We named the mare Light Warhorse Buttercup, and he was able to charge in at the flank of these degenerate Thracians and smash into their line, killed one instantly. The Berserk backed him up and also took down one of these degenerate Thracians. Other people attacked the priest, and the Purloiner was shooting from the trees but missed. So it's a good melee. They did eventually succeed. The civilians, there were 5, I think it was 5 of the degenerate Thracians in the bronze armor, 1 priest, and then 5 civilians, I call them, who were in tattered rags and loincloths. They just fled into the jungle, including the 2 that were being drowned when they got there. So interestingly, one cool thing that did happen is the Runegraver commanded one of these sacrificers to jump into the cenote, and he started sinking in his bronze plate armor. And the Purloiner, being Atlantean, dove into the water, presumably to try to rescue him. It didn't quite work. And then what I decided to do is have another potential random encounter, I had an idea of what could happen on a certain die roll. I had the Purloiner roll, and something strange happened. So something as he tried to pull this man out, because they did want a prisoner. There was another job. Their job they took was to go map the southern coast of the island, which was a multiple day job at 10 gold pieces per person, and plus all the free, look at all our loot, or not our loot, all the stuff that we have collected from the beach and from taking ships. You can take what you need as far as adventuring gear goes. And actually, the Purloiner made a friend with the quartermaster because he kind of tested all the bladders and bags to make sure they didn't have any holes in them, they were still intact, and decided on his own to place those bad ones aside, so the quartermaster and her charges did not have to do so. So that was kind of a nice bit of role playing that I rewarded the player with, making sort of a friend, named another NPC, a sergeant. I think it was Sergeant Helia. I can't remember. We have it in the notes somewhere. They definitely took notes, just because you never know if these characters will come back. Anyway, it was pretty cool, the fight. And then so something happened as he tried to pull this man out from drowning, because the other job they had was to capture someone alive, capture a degenerate Thracian beast man or a lizard folk person, one of these beast men, and take him to be interrogated by the Amazons. So anyway, he tried to save him, but something tugged back, and I asked him to make a saving throw versus sorcery for fear, like a fear check, and he failed, and he just ran out of there and played it really well. So great player response to that. So I know sometimes these things, I let the player decide what they want to do. As far as agency goes, he didn't want to flail around or go into a rage. He just fled because something dark in the water there is kind of weird. So then they said, okay, I guess we're going to fall back away from the cenote. And in fact, 4 skeletons did rise from the cenote, but they just went in a different direction than where the players went. Again, a random die roll to see what would happen. So I love, just as an aside, I really love the Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerers of Hyperborea screen that came with it. It's got such great information, including the reaction table, saving throws, all sorts of great stuff. It's a very nice, comprehensive table. So great design on that. And I really didn't reference the book so much as I referenced the screen. So pretty cool stuff. So anyway, they decided, hey, we got all this gear. They found out, they had a rumor that there was this Hyborian guy that was buying Thracian artifacts. So they went back to town, tracked him down, and got a good money on their return for their half a day march out, half a day march back. And they said, well, we didn't quite get to where we're supposed to go, but it was cool because this is the idea, is you go back into town, get rid of all the stuff, start earning some XP, and now there's plenty of time in the session to go out and do another job. So what I did have happen, I just kind of, as this play emerges, I have some ideas of what these cenotes are and what's going on there. They did find out that the chainmail, the hammer, and the mask were magical. There's some other gewgaws and gadgets that these Thracians had. So they kind of got some cool loot. And then they went out again, no encounters on the way to the beach this time, and they saw like a shipwreck that they wanted to explore. So they camped for the night, and I had the previous night, like the Purloiner, who had seen something down in the cenote, was not doing well. Couldn't find his quartermaster friend, so was kind of out of sorts the next day, and had a nightmare actually of this degenerate Thracian in archaic bronze plate armor with pinpoint lights for eyes, is pointing at him and saying that it was coming for him, even though he probably couldn't understand the language. It was bizarre. So they definitely also learned that there's this pervasiveness, and they heard rumors about the god of death, I think it's Thanos, holds some sway over this island. Maybe that's part of an Amazonian crusade that might be ongoing. Who knows? Only maybe the Amazon Paladin that played might know. I don't know. So anyway, it's all rumors and speculation what the players want to pursue, which is why I like these types of games. So anyway, that night, when they were kind of on watch on the beach, it was a white that had formed from this dead person falling into the cenote, came out to try to take on the party. And it was a really nice of how they figured out how to destroy the white with only one magic weapon, one magic suit of armor, and a silver dagger among them in the party. So suffice to say, the Prolorner ran away, though was able to successfully cast Sanctuary. The Cryomancer went down from a touch of the white. The Amazon was also injured by the white, though she was able to burn the white with holy energy from the lay on hands. So they did hear a rumor that could work against the dead on this island at least. And then what I loved is, a lot of these people, only 3 of them, the ones on watch, are ready and have their gear and are armored, but everyone else is like getting their armor on, trying to do something. Finally, they said, forget it, we're not going to get our armor. The Cataphract wanted to make sure Buttercup didn't run away from this strange creature, because she was definitely agitated. The Runegraver tossed the hammer to the Berserk, who went into a rage, while the Runegraver smacked at the white with his magical chainmail. Sure, he did damage, but the Berserker just destroyed the white in a fit of rage, smashing it with that magical warhammer. So that was a cool encounter. It was neat that the players thought on their feet, and this came out through some random die rolls that occurred the previous day. So and for the encounter, right? So I rolled randomly to see when the encounter would occur. If it did occur, it might not have, but happened. So it's kind of cool. So I guess if it had not occurred, I guess there would be a Quantum White somewhere running around the jungle. So good thing these players took care of it for you guys who ever play on Down and Out in Fort Thunder. Anyway, they went to the boat. It was really cool how they figured out how to get to the boat. The players that could climb got up there. They created some rope ladders, had plenty of rope, and then the Prolorner, being an Atlantean, was able to swim in. They killed a fangfish. They prevented an eel from getting in there, and they got a lot of cool loot that I sort of randomly generated and thought of as we went. So let me give you their loot, and then I think that's probably about it, because then they took their awesome gains and decided to head back to town with all their loot and see what they wanted to do next, because they only looked at like a part of the ship. So here's what they found. Bear with me here as I switch the screen. Does that work? Yeah, it does work. So they found in the shipwreck a gold sextant, 2 scroll tubes, a lantern, a letter opener, an onyx ball that was a paperweight, some quills, and an inkwell that was sealed, a sealed box with 2 pistols, small chest filled with vials, pewter dinnerware enough for 6 full settings, cups and plates, a large chest with gold and silver, a curved dagger, 2 jackets, 2 broadcoats, 1 hat, 6 sealed bottles of wine, crystal wine glasses, and it was a really good haul there. Because they had, in fact, found the captain's cabin, and too bad all the paper had probably dissolved and melted. They're sure there was a wonderful logbook about the captain's journey, but it did strike them as odd that they didn't recognize the type of ship, or even, the Atlantean kind of knew the kind of shape of the pistols. Atlanteans in their heyday had like ray guns and the like, but what these were and what, the black powder stuff, it's just kind of fun to add to a Hyperborea game because you can, right? So I did play in last year in a game that Jeff Talanian ran where our party found a revolver. So yeah, it was pretty neat. Anything goes in Hyperborea to go with the fiction and the emergent. So I thought it was a really great session. I feel like the players had a great time, and it's a fun Really fun game. It was really cool to see all those classes in play. Also, it really showed the diversity and the different types of classes you can play. It was really cool to have like the barbarian scout ahead, and surprise, help to surprise the party of the ritual partakers of the cenote. Yeah, the cataphract was able to charge, the berserk was able to rage, the paladin, well, unfortunately, the poor paladin missed a lot, but was a strong. Paladins can be pretty strong, and the cryomancer got to cast spells and do a lot of cool stuff. So the purloiner snuck around. The rune graver cast some powerful spells. The slice of the hand and casting the command, and it was good. It was good. But it's not all about their abilities. It's kind of like the players at the table dealing with the situations thrown their way and thinking on their feet. And I thought that was a really great table, and I hope to have more games like that in Down and Out in Fort Thunder in the future. So thank you all for listening. This has been the Geomologist Presents. Shoot me a line. Tell me what you think of my old school style play at North Texas RPG Con. I had a great time. I really want to run more of these types of games. Shoot me a line, geomologist@gmail.com. Drop me a voice message or email there, or on through the Discord. I also have a SpeakPipe account that you can leave a message at. And yeah, intro and outro music by TJ Drennan. My wife Amy does the cover clip art. So yeah, have a good one, good night, and good rolling.